A classic Tetris match consists of two opponents playing a game of NES Tetris and trying to get the higher score before their pieces reach the top of the screen and their game is over. This format has created many dramatic victories and defeats over the years, but there's a match that just happened in January 2023 that stands out to me as the most brutal loss I've ever seen. And by brutal loss, I'm not referring to a bad performance by a player. Occasionally, players get very low scores, sometimes even 0 points, but stumbling out of the gate isn't that much of a brutal loss. The game never really got going. Now, I'm thinking of a great, even legendary performance by a player, one that should have all but guaranteed them victory, done when the stakes were tremendously high, and yet they still couldn't win. This is the story of that performance. Let's get into the stakes. The Classic Tetris Monthly Masters event is the biggest tournament in the scene other than the World Championships. Each month, only the top 16 qualifying players in the world get in, and then play best of 5 matches in a single elimination bracket. Only the best of the best have a chance of taking the title, and the two best players by far to have never won a title were Sidnev and Tristop. Both of them had made the finals multiple times in the past, coming tantalizingly close to winning it all, but falling short each time. But in January, they each had a golden opportunity to win their first title. Both of them had managed to make the semifinals, but what really made this a special circumstance was the other side of the bracket. An underdog SV, who'd never come close to winning the tournament before, had just defeated the multi-time champion Pixel Andy in the other semifinals match after Andy had an uncharacteristically inconsistent performance to complete a miracle run to the finals. Tristop and Sidnev would both be heavy favorites against SV, so for them this could finally be a favorable finals matchup they'd have a good chance of winning. Only problem was they'd have to get through each other first. The prize pool for the month was over $2,000, so there was a non-trivial amount of money on the line too. And wouldn't you know it, they'd end up having a match for the ages. So before getting into their games, I want to take a brief look at the statistics around scores in games in this tournament to put into perspective just how crazy Tristop and Sidnev's games are about to be. I'll be looking at the 3 months of matches in the Masters event that led up to Tristop and Sidnev's match, because they were all played under a new rule that would actually become a factor here: the level 39 super kill screen. Basically what happened is the end of the game used to be level 29, the fastest speed where players couldn't play anymore, so they try to get as many 4-line clears, aka Tetrises, as possible before level 29 since those got by far the most points. But a new rolling technique was developed that allowed players to move pieces fast enough to get singles indefinitely past level 29, and the strat got OP enough that a ROM patch was added that doubled the speed of the game one more time on level 39, making it nearly impossible to play on again. This meant that players now had to go for Tetrises past level 29 instead of just singles if they wanted the best chance to win. So sorting by the total score and total lines cleared, this is what all 246 games played to completion from November to January looked like. The results are pretty all over the place, but you can see where the general middle point is: a little past level 29 and a little over 1 million points. But what I find most interesting is that you can compare individual players and their games by how they stack up against everybody else's. So I tallied up all the results by players and found that a median game score by Sidnev over this time period was better than 62% of all other scores, and a median game score by Tristop was better than 55% of all other scores. Now maybe that doesn't sound super high because it's just a little bit over the midpoint, but out of the 30 players in this time period who made the Masters event, Tristop's 55% actually ranked 9th, and Sidnev's 62% ranked 3rd. The elite players are able to consistently score just a little bit higher than the 50% line of what is typical, which is enough to clobber the lower rung of players. So let's get into their games. The first to 3 victories wins the match. And in game 1, Sidnev and Tristop both transition into level 29 with a Tetris at exactly the same time. They both have over 1 million points. The first digit is in hexadecimal, so A represents 1 million, B represents 1.1 million, and so on. And they are only 8,000 points apart, which is just 1/4 the value of a Tetris. So now Sidnev and Tristop have 10 levels, or 100 lines, to get as many Tetrises as possible. Right away, Sidnev has a brutal misdrop, resulting in a messy board with a high risk of a game over at this speed. But incredibly, Sidnev manages to keep composure and survive. At the same time, time, Tristop encounters a mess of his own. Both players manage to clean up their stacks, but Sidnev is only set up for a triple, and Tristop gets a Tetris, pushing him into about a 1 Tetris lead. Both players trade Tetrises back and forth, and then go into level 34, but now Tristop is in massive trouble. He's stuck in another super high dig, as Sidnev gets a Tetris to erase the deficit and take the slimmest of leads. Going into level 35, Sidnev and Tristop get simultaneous Tetrises. On level 36, they both throw down Tetrises again. Sidnev's lead is down to a Tetris and almost nothing else. When Tristop gets another one, the lead is down to just a 1/10 of a Tetris. It's worth taking a pause as a reminder that scoring this many Tetrises past level 29 is not normal. Most of the time, these kinds of digs and risks are deadly. Anyways, Sidnev gets stuck with no ideal spot to put this S piece. Placing it here might leave the right side too high for the line piece to get over, so it gets thrown in the center in a huge gamble, and Sidnev still gets the Tetris, but now has to figure out how to deal with the remaining clutter on top of the stack. Getting up super high while Tristop's not in danger but still trying to get things clean so he can build up for a Tetris again. Sidnev hangs an L piece, and that finally ends up forcing a top out. So now, Tristop is only half a Tetris behind. 1 Tetris would win it, but he's on level 38. He only has a few lines left until he hits the level 39 super kill screen. He sets up the Tetris and waits for the line piece, waiting, and the Tetris god is merciless. The final line piece does not come, and Tristop finishes less than half a Tetris short. With the dust now cleared, Sidnev has gotten an E score and Tristop a D score. That translates to 1,416,000 versus 1,397,000. Tristop's score was higher than 94% of all other games in the 3-month time span. But Sidnev's score was higher than 95%, just barely edging him out. But okay, that's just game 1. Still more games to go. What happened next? In game 2, Sidnev and Tristop enter level 29 with Sidnev in a commanding 4 Tetris lead. Tristop is really gonna have to push it, and right away goes crazy aggressive. Instead of taking a 2-line skim with his J piece, he places it upright, a move that takes nerves of steel, and barely gets a line piece over for the Tetris. It's almost for naught though, as he accidentally double flips a line piece to miss out on the next Tetris, but instantly regains his composure, skims, and gets the Tetris with the next line piece available. Both players are pushing the limits of aggression into level 33. Tristop gets a Tetris, but Sidnev gets one right back. Tristop is seemingly unable to find an opening, but then Sidnev gets 2 ill-timed squares. Tristop tries to seize the opportunity, but by the time he's built up for a Tetris, Sidnev has managed to open the board up again and get a Tetris as well, keeping the lead at 3 Tetrises. But then finally, Tristop gets another Tetris, and Sidnev has a few misdrops, giving Tristop the time to make up some ground. Sidnev tries to stabilize things, but has a few more misdrops. It looks like it's nearing the end. Tristop might just need to chase down the current score and he'll be good. Tristop builds a Tetris to cut the lead down to 1, but somehow Sidnev is surviving. Tristop gets another Tetris to cut the lead to half a Tetris. Despite surviving, Sidnev is in no position to Tetris with this messy stack, and this is Tristop's game now. He builds up and gets a Tetris to take the lead into level 36, coming all the way back from a massive deficit. And Sidnev is still not clean. Tristop builds for a Tetris, but then misdrops with a line piece to the left. This is an extremely dire hang. To get a line piece over requires a nearly frame-perfect roll with a minimum of 26 Hz. Tristop only has a 30th of a second of margin for error. Tristop builds up a theoretical Tetris on the right, but cannot flip the line piece and get it over in time, and is unable to clear any more lines afterwards. Meanwhile, Sidnev has still just kept trucking along burning lines and ends up retaking the lead with a double on level 37. But since these games are restreamed over Twitch, there's typically a 20-second delay before players find out what has happened. Sidnev doesn't know the game is over, tries to set up an ultra-aggressive Tetris on level 38, but misdrops. Sidnev finishes just a quarter of a Tetris ahead. Tristop had played like a madman and had worked so hard to come all the way back, but but come just short a second time, as again, both of them score over 1.3 million points, an 87% game for Tristop and an 89% game for Sidnev. Sidnev has all the momentum, but it's not over for Tristop. There's still game 3. At the transition to level 29, Sidnev and Tristop are both well over 1 million points, already an above average game again. Sidnev has about a 2 Tetris lead, and Tristop goes for broke, stacking 2 squares in the center. If Tristop doesn't get a line piece here, he's basically screwed because he likely can't get anything over to the left, but the gamble pays off and he gets a Tetris, but is still at risk and only barely gets pieces over to the left to fill it out. By level 31, both players are still digging, but Sidnev has maintained a 2.5 Tetris lead. It's do or die time for Tristop. He has a clean board, is ready to set up for a Tetris, but hangs a line piece on the left and then hangs another line piece. The height on the left side is a death sentence. It is actually impossible to get a line piece over 11 rows high at this speed due to the game running at 60 frames per second. So Tristop does the only thing he can. He burns down the 4 available lines at the bottom to reduce the height to 7 rows on the left. Still insanely difficult, but now technically possible. Tristop has a 3-frame window in order to nail this. That's a 20th of a second margin, and this time he gets it and saves the game. Looking at the instant replay, he could not have cut it any closer, but he's still in trouble. 100,000 points behind in a must-win game. That's about 2.5 Tetrises. He gets a Tetris set up, but has no time to wait for a long bar, has to burn it down with 2 L pieces. And meanwhile, Sidnev is crushing it, gets another Tetris to go up more than 3 Tetrises. Tristop sets up a high delayed skim, another big gamble, but he cannot lose this one, and it pays off with another center well Tetris. And then in the middle of level 34, Sidnev double flips a line piece and misses the Tetris. Still able to skim and reopen the well, but the miss drops a square and the board spirals out of control. Sidnev is going to top out. This is finally the break that Tristop needed. He nails some clutch moves to stabilize the board. He's less than 2 Tetrises behind now. 2 Tetrises would win it. Misdrops a line piece on the left again, but saves the game again with another crucial roll on a line piece. Tristop has 4 levels until the super kill screen, plenty of time, has a level 35 Tetris set up and gets the Tetris. Only half a Tetris to go now. Has to throw 2 S pieces over to the side, but then hangs a T piece on the left and then misses the tuck with the next T piece. The board is unraveling quickly after a few more misdrops. Tristop regains focus and clutches yet another line piece to the left, but it doesn't clear anything, seemingly throwing Tristop off rhythm, and he ends up misdropping a few more times and tops out just 20,000 points short. Van Dweller, the commentator, is flabbergasted.
Tristop is not going to be able to chase this down. Had a prime opportunity to do it and plenty of runway, and Sidnev will outlast Tristop for the sweep.
For the 3rd time in a row, Tristop and Sidnev throw up double 1.3 million scores, an 86 and a 90. Tristop did everything he could, setting up the Tetris but getting droughted in game 1, coming all the way back from 4 Tetrises behind in game 2, and surviving with unbelievable moves multiple times in game 3. But each time, he fell less than a Tetris short. And it feels like in isolation, these numbers don't even show how improbable this was. So let's take a closer look. If Tristop gets a 94, 87, and 86% score in the first 3 games of any given match, the odds of him sweeping right then and there are 70.33%. The odds of him winning at least 2 of the games are 96.77%. And the odds of him winning at least 1 game are 99.89%. Meaning the chances of losing all 3 games are just 0.11%. That's 1 in 909 odds. But that's exactly what Sidnev did. Each game pushing aggression just enough to win against all odds and punch a ticket to the finals, where SV was waiting. Sidnev was now carrying a 64% median game score going into this match, whereas SV over the past 3 months had only gotten 45%. This was a lopsided matchup that seemed destined to finally deliver Sidnev a long overdue Masters event title, right after giving Tristop the most brutal Tetris loss ever. Except this video isn't about Tristop. This video is about Sidnev. In game 1 of the finals, disaster struck when Sidnev misdropped an S-piece on the left right before the level 29 transition and got droughted while waiting for a Tetris. SV ended up dying to the same drought, but was already 2.5 Tetrises ahead, so he ended up taking a surprise game 1. Sidnev's 981,000 was a little bit mediocre, at least by Masters event standards, coming in at 39%, and SV's game was 58%. This was the first relatively normal game I've looked at in this video. But then in game 2, SV would enter level 29 with a gargantuan 4.5 Tetris lead. Sidnev has to start making up ground, but then misdrops right after setting up a Tetris and ends up blocking the well and not being able to recover, blowing up in frustration. However, it likely wouldn't have mattered if Sidnev got out anyway, as SV continued the torrid pace until level 35, finishing 11 Tetrises ahead with over 1.5 million points. Sidnev's 1.1 million wasn't bad at all, a 61% game, but SV had just thrown down a 99%. This was the second highest scoring game in all 3 months combined. Game 3 was a fumble, as Sidnev topped out with only 680,000 on level 22, but got a ridiculously lucky break as SV's internet went out before he could chase down the score, leading the game to be replayed. So Sidnev was back from the grave and didn't waste the opportunity in a replayed game 3, transitioning to level 29 with almost 1.2 million and a 1 Tetris lead. But SV would just not go down easy, gambling on a Tetris and getting it to almost entirely erase the deficit. Sidnev got into a tough dig on level 32 and hung a line in a T-piece on the right at an impossible height, clinging to just a half Tetris lead. SV would set up for a Tetris and get it to wrap up the 3-game sweep and finish things in style by getting all the way to the level 39 super kill screen with another 1.5 million score, completing an absurdly unlikely journey to his first Masters event title. Sidnev's final game was actually quite good, an 84%er, but SV had closed it out with a 98%. The chances of a median player in the Masters event getting a 58, 99, and 98 in any 3 given games is 1 in 11,904. This concludes the story of a great, even legendary performance by Sidnev, one that should have all but guaranteed victory, done in a crucial moment where the stakes were tremendously high, and yet in the end, it still didn't result in a Masters event title. The chances of Sidnev overcoming 1 in 909 odds of sweeping Tristop to then face the 1 in 11,904 odds from SV in the finals is 10,820,737 to 1. That is the most brutal Tetris loss ever. Now, I should say here, the point of this video is not to harp on any particular player's failure. It's to emphasize that just looking at the champions doesn't necessarily show the full story. The silver lining is that in Classic Tetris Monthly, of course, there's another chance every month, and Tristop and Sidnev have an excellent chance of winning their first titles this year. But if they don't, they have already demonstrated, without a doubt, that they are part of the elite group of players that represent the pinnacle of what humans can do in playing Tetris. So in months to come, I'll be looking forward to seeing them compete, and if you'd like to watch along as well, I'll leave a link to the Classic Tetris Monthly's Discord server, which has a schedule of all future streams at the top. And one last thing, the statistics that made this video possible are ones I have been gathering on my own to study the lengths of matches for line caps, and after a bunch of requests, I have published the data. So if anyone else wants to try and do some cool things or analyze trends with Tetris stats, I'll leave a link in the description to the sheet. And you can discuss anything about the stats in the Match Stats channel, which is also in the CTM Discord server. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.